What's up, everybody? My name's Tommy Sobel. Welcome to my podcast. Still feels so crazy saying that. I've been wanting to do a podcast for literally 15 years. I was so early on the podcast track, and I could be such a big podcaster already. It's never too late. It's the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is today. We're here. Next episode. Excited about this one. So glad you're here. Welcome back. So this episode is, I'm sure you've already seen the title, but if you're like me, you feel like you've tried everything. You've gone to therapy. You've done the meditation apps. You've tried breath work and done a bunch of psychoactive substances to connect to something greater, but you still feel like you're not where you want to be. You still feel like you're not where you should be in life. Maybe you still feel that you are playing small or you're getting in your own way. Maybe you have big dreams, but then you don't go for them, or you feel like you're not ready. You're just not fulfilled or satisfied yet. Like you need to do more or be more or accomplish more first. You're just not feeling enough like you're living your fullest life. Do you feel that way? Well, this episode is about why you might still feel that way after having seemingly tried everything. Here's why. You ready? I'm going to tell you why just right off the bat. The reason why you are still struggling with having deep life satisfaction is because of limiting beliefs. They're self-beliefs, but they really work like programs in your mind, in the subconscious mind. If your brain and your body had an operating system, your beliefs are the programs that you're running in your mind and in your energy field all day, every day. It's kind of like firmware, the software that controls the operating system. And beliefs can be empowering or they can be disempowering. They can be limiting. An example of an empowering belief is I love myself. And an example of a limiting belief is I'm unlovable, or I need to work to be loved. I need to perform. I'm not good enough, or I'm not lovable naturally. It's a very common one that I've had to work through myself many times. These limiting beliefs, they work under the surface in the subconscious mind. And if you're not healing at the belief level, you could be doing all the ayahuasca, you could be doing all the breath work, all the journaling, but if you're not changing your beliefs, that's why you still feel stuck. You still feel overwhelmed. You still feel not good enough, because that is the core root level, okay? Now, why do we have these beliefs? Where do they come from? How can we get rid of them, okay? That's the most important thing. I want to talk a little bit how the subconscious mind works. The subconscious mind, you can split into 4 different components. This is a concept that I didn't come up with. This came through Viana Stabal, the creator of Theta Healing. I learned this through her practices, through my spiritual mentor, Paulina Leroy. The first level of the subconscious mind is called the survivor self. This is the part of the subconscious that wants to keep you safe, and it remembers trauma. For example, if you stood on stage when you were a little kid, you were at the spelling bee and you spelled something wrong and you felt super embarrassed and all the parents were looking at you being like, oh my God, I thought he was going to win, and you feel their disappointment. The survivor self is the part of you that's going to remember that. It's going to have that emotional memory to say, standing in front of people could lead to embarrassment or disappointment. It holds on to trauma. It's the part of you that says, okay, I don't want to play full out. I don't want to be seen. I don't want to be on a big stage again, because when I did that, something bad happened. That's the survivor self, okay? This is something that happens beneath the surface. We're not consciously doing this, but again, the subconscious mind is like 80 to 90% of our psyche. The second component to the subconscious mind is called the shadow self, or the undercurrent. There's a few different terms for it. The shadow self, or the undercurrent, works hand in hand with the survivor. And when it sees that the survivor self has experienced a trauma, the undercurrent wants to protect it. The undercurrent is the part of you that establishes these limiting beliefs. beliefs. The part of you that says, standing on stage was really painful. I don't want to do that again. How could I save myself from experiencing that pain or torture again? I'm going to establish a belief that showing myself, being public, is unsafe. It's safer to hide. It's safer to play small. Those statements are what the undercurrent concludes are true and becomes a limiting belief. So every single trauma, quote unquote trauma that you experience, every single wound as a child, there's a limiting belief that's created. And that's how those two aspects of the subconscious mind go hand in hand and work together. Now, the shadow self, it's trying to protect you. It's trying to help you. The problem is, because of how old that part of the brain is, it's just not helping you in the best way. It's like a 5-year-old that's not developed. It's immature, and it's trying to help us to stay safe, but not always in the best way. Because it's obviously not true as you get older that playing small, not speaking up, not sharing how you feel is safe, is helpful. The safest thing is to play full out and be big and present yourself and show up. And so that's something that's not serving us. That's why they're limiting. And these beliefs, they might have served us at some time. So maybe they were necessary, but they're just not serving you now. They might not have always been limiting, but they are now as adults. The third level of the subconscious mind is called the higher self. The higher self is such a powerful aspect of ourselves. It's basically its own entity that you can access in meditative states. It's the part of us that knows our peak potential and wants us to reach it. It's like the most aligned, most activated, most alive part of our being, the best part of us that we have access to, and we can speak to it. The higher self also really wants us to learn. It really wants us to grow. And so it can feel like that big brother figure, like, what are you supposed to be learning from this experience? What are you supposed to be growing from this? What are the lessons here? That's often what our subconscious higher self is wanting from us. And the final component of the subconscious mind almost deserves its own category. It's called the ego. And I don't mean ego in the Freudian sense with like the id, ego, superego. That's a whole other thing. The way I see ego is the aspect to our unconscious that has our drive, our motivation, ambition to succeed. That's our ego. And it's really healthy to have an ego. The ego is vilified and people are always like, I want to kill my ego. I think that really what it's about is we all want to have a balanced ego. There's something really beautiful about being ambitious, being motivated, wanting to live the fullest life and make a positive impact, to do amazing work. That's where the ego comes from. It creates that desire to achieve and to build, but we want it to be balanced. So you know that you have an imbalanced ego when you see yourself comparing yourself to others. When you say, oh, I can never have a podcast that good. Their podcast is so good. Or I'm not smart enough. I'm not cool enough. I'm not good looking enough. They're better than me. They're taller than me. They're smarter than me. They're prettier than me. Those types of comparisons are also ego. And it means that you have an imbalanced ego. And so that is also something that's coming from the subconscious. So balancing your ego so you can say, okay, I want to be super ambitious and super driven, but I'm not here to compare myself to anybody else. I'm here on my own journey. That's something you want to work with in a meditative state, because again, it's part of the subconscious, to balance your ego and feel a sense of maybe competition with yourself. You know, Matthew McConaughey style, if you saw his Oscar speech, he's like, I'm not competing with anyone except myself 10 years from now. How do I become the better version of myself in the future? So those are the 4 aspects of the subconscious: the survivor self, the shadow self, the higher self, and ego. When it comes to limiting beliefs, again, what we experience predominantly are beliefs from trauma in this lifetime. I've shared a trauma in the first episode about my journey having psoriasis on my penis, which I recommend you listen to if you haven't already. That's a really great example of a core wound that I experienced when I was young, one of many. I also spoke on stage when I was a kid and had that embarrassing moment of speaking on stage. I was a kid actor. I had a core trauma of not being prepared and standing on stage for my lines, and I felt like I disappointed people. I let other people down. There was a lot of limiting beliefs associated with, I'm not ready, I'm not good enough, I need to be perfect, that my shadow self decided from that experience and a few others. Most of you are going to experience traumas in this lifetime that present themselves first when you're doing healing on limiting beliefs, but there's actually 4 levels of belief. And I just want to share these 4 levels because maybe you have a fear that you've had your whole life. Maybe you were born with it. Maybe you have a phobia, or maybe you have a pain in your body that doesn't really make sense because you never had an injury there. That's where it gets to the other levels of belief and the other levels of trauma. The top level, the first level, is trauma that occurred in this lifetime on this level. The second is on the genetic level, or ancestral traumas. You can actually experience traumas that your parents, grandparents, or up to like 7 generations ago, traumas that they experienced that are passed down in your DNA or passed down through the behaviors and the belief systems of your ancestors, as your parents and grandparents, for example, are raising you and modeling the behaviors as caretakers for how you should act in the world. So you have these genetic experiences from your parents. So you could be born with that. And a lot of ancestral or genetic trauma is around money blocks. A lot of people whose ancestors lived through the Great Depression, they all experienced this period of time where there was money scarcity, extreme fear and anxiety and loss financially. And so a lot of that has been passed down to us today, where we feel like it's hard to make a lot of money, or people who have a lot of money are greedy. Money is the root of all evil. Or if I'm going to be a spiritual person, then I need to live without money. Having a lot of money and being spiritual is not possible. Like, these are all beliefs that were passed down from our ancestors that are beliefs. They're not real, and you can change them. But those are the common on the genetic level. Then on the third level, that's the past life level. So you can actually come into this world where your soul from past lives have experienced traumas, and they've established limiting beliefs from that. I remember a healing story that I love because in this life, my whole life, for no particular reason, I felt like I was supposed to be alone. I was going to end up alone, that my relationships weren't going to work, that I was better off alone, I was more comfortable alone. And I didn't really understand why. There was no real reason. Finally, I did a healing on that. I went into the meditative state, did super conscious work on it, and I realized that this started in a past life where I was the last living member of my tribe. And it was kind of like apocalypto. I was a Mayan tribes member in this village, and I'm coming back from the river. I go into my village with all the huts, and everybody had been killed. Everybody was gone. And I literally had to live the rest of my existence alone as the last living member, sitting by the bonfire by myself. And so it was from that experience I established this limiting belief that I'm going to end up alone, because I did in that lifetime. And it was only through the healing process of actually releasing that belief to create a new belief, one that was more empowering for me, one that I wanted to be true in this lifetime, that I can be safe with others. I don't need to be alone, that my relationships can be safe, and I can be deeply connected to other people. Those were new beliefs that I downloaded and replaced. And it was only after that that I was able to move forward in my relationship. I was having issues taking the next step in my relationship. And it was shortly after that that I finally got up the guts to propose to my fiance and now my wife. And so now I don't feel like I'm meant to be alone anymore. I feel actually like I'm meant to start a family, and I'm meant to model that, have something new. I've also worked with one client that comes to mind where she always felt like she wasn't going to be a good mother. She wanted to have babies. She wanted to be in a relationship and start a family, but she always felt like she wasn't going to be good at it, and she didn't really know why. And we did some healing together. And back in the day, in a past life, something had happened that made her believe that she wasn't going to be a good mother, or she wasn't a good mother. And we released that. And now when she sees babies or when she talks about it, she feels fully aligned about it. She doesn't feel like there's any energy stuck there. She doesn't feel incongruent with it. So those are a few great examples. But then the fourth level of trauma or belief is actually on the soul level. According to certain spiritual practices, including mine, we are spiritual beings with souls that come down into this human experience to learn and to grow, to raise our level of consciousness to take to the next plane of existence. But between lives, you can experience traumas too. There are phases of being incarnated and between incarnations. When you are just a pure consciousness, it is possible to experience traumas too. There are limiting beliefs that you can establish. And a lot of my biggest breakthroughs have come from healings on the soul level, where I realized at some point anxiety I was feeling or this fear started back when I was this blob of consciousness just floating in the cosmos, where I had felt like I deserved punishment, where I had felt guilty, like I had done something wrong, and I didn't even know exactly what I did wrong. I thought that I did something wrong with source, with God, and I didn't even believe in God at that point. I was literally atheist, not even agnostic. I believed in the scientific method, hypothesis, like just believed in what could be proven with science. And it was coming out of that experience, I realized that I had been denying God. I had been denying this spiritual aspect of oneness that at some higher level I knew to be true. And I had this massive breakdown, massive breakthrough. I realized that higher power does exist. I had my come to Jesus moment and realized that I didn't need to keep punishing myself anymore. I didn't need to keep distancing myself or believing that God didn't exist, which was a limiting belief. So that was a limiting belief that was on the soul level, that there was no God, that there was no source, that after life there was just this nothingness, which I had been fearing for most of my life. So those are the 4 levels of healing, or the 4 levels of belief, the 4 levels of trauma, not to be confused with the 4 levels of change that we've talked about in another episode, which is how to solve problems. And what I would like to show you now is an exercise on how to know if you have limiting beliefs. Because you might be listening to this and feeling, okay, I want to know, am I subconsciously sabotaging myself with limiting beliefs? Do I believe that I'm worthy? Am I lovable? And by the way, I would say that you probably are. I mean, I haven't met a single person who does not, who is completely healed. We are constantly healing and growing. There's always the next step. Typically, people have between 200 to 300 limiting beliefs. I feel like I had way more, and I still have limiting beliefs that I'm working through. And you don't need to heal all of them, by the way. It's not about being perfect. It's about growing. And I'm going to teach you how to test to see if you have a limiting belief. Now, the first aspect to this is actually to do what's called an energy break. An energy break breaks off your energy from anyone else's. Let's say you're having a phone call and you're having a stressful conversation. Energy breaks are really helpful when you're in someone's energy. So you basically take the back of your right hand to your chest, and then you put your left hand in front of your right hand. And then you create a little bit of friction, like you rub them together. And then this is where you create the break. So you bring your right hand towards your chest and your left hand away from the chest. And then you go up with the right hand and down with the left hand. So in total, it looks like this. And that's called an energy break. And that's just great to break off your energy from others. So once you do an energy break, then you can do what's called testing the yeses and testing the nos. You basically turn your body into a pendulum, and when you ask your body a yes or no question, your body is always going to give you the right answer. Why is that true? Because the body doesn't know how to lie. The body always tells the truth. You can ask a question of your body and get an answer. And if you ask a yes or no question, that makes it easy to know what the answer is. So I'm going to stand up. If you can't see me fully, it's the biggest deal. I don't want to change the camera. What you do is you close your eyes and out loud you say, "Body, show me a strong yes." And I'm finding myself kind of leaning forward, kind of tipping forward like a pendulum. And then you're going to ask the second question. You'll say, "Body, show me a strong no." And then if you can't see me, I'm kind of falling backwards. So now that I've tested the yeses and the nos, I now know that a yes means falling forward and a no means falling backward. Okay, so I've tested the yeses and the nos. Now what you can do is you can actually say a statement, like a belief, and see if your body tells you if it's a yes or a no. So that's really powerful with limiting beliefs. I'm going to do a couple. So we'll say, "I am lovable." It's falling forward for me. So that means I believe I'm lovable. We could think of another one that's like, "I am good enough." And that's a yes for me. I'm not going to do too many, but that's how you test for limiting beliefs. You probably want me to test one that's a no for me right now, but I'm not sure what that would be. Maybe I'll do some limiting belief testing for you guys live with a list. Actually, about lists, at the end of every episode, I give a resource, a freebie to my listeners for doing this. So at the end of this episode, I'm going to have a list of really common limiting beliefs for you to download and muscle test for yourself. As we wrap up this episode, what we discussed was if you have been doing lots of healing work and you feel like you've tried everything and you're still getting in your own way, it is because you still have these limiting beliefs that are on an embodiment level, stopping you from becoming the person that you want to be and feeling the way that you want to feel. Superconscious therapy is my version of how I go into the meditative state, connect to someone energetically, and get to the bottom of the limiting belief and delete it, cancel it, remove it, and replace it with new beliefs and new feelings that are more aligned with who you want to be and how you want to feel. That's how I created my business, but there's many other ways to do it that I'll be discussing in future episodes as well. Thank you so much for listening. Hope that you enjoy this really key component to healing, what healing really is at the deepest level. And if you're working with people who are healers, or maybe you're a healer, but you're not specifically feeling like you're changing on the belief level, I hope that this gives you an opportunity to cut some corners, to maybe accelerate your growth and feel better sooner. Because I'm telling you, and I see it every single day, if you just heal on the belief level, you don't need to journal or meditate or reframe. You don't need to keep doing a bunch of things. You just naturally are a different person. You just feel suddenly like, I'm not meant to be alone anymore. I can be in a healthy relationship. You suddenly feel like I am good enough. I can live a life that I truly desire. And it's just natural. And so I invite you to continue to join me on this journey to heal. Much more to come. Thank you so much.